Welcome once again to the Icons. I'm your host, the sports professor Rick Horrow. This month, as we move from the draft, getting ready for training camp, we have a very, very special guest. Mark Murphy, Green Bay Packers president and CEO since 2007, will talk about everything relating to his team and the league. Let's get started by going inside the Icon. Mark Murphy was born and raised in Western New York, where he was a standout high school athlete in baseball, football, and basketball. He played college baseball and football at Colgate, later earning an MBA from American University and a law degree from Georgetown. Murphy went from an undrafted free agent to playing 8 seasons for Washington in the NFL. He was an All-Pro in 1983, Super Bowl champion, and was named one of the 90 greatest players in franchise history. After his playing career, Murphy served as an athletic director for 16 years at Colgate and Northwestern. He was named Packers president and CEO on December 3, 2007. Murphy announced early in 2024 that he would retire from the position in July of 2025. Let's talk about your career for a couple of minutes. Congratulations on an amazing career, I guess, in some autocratic countries and also with the Green Bay Packers Constitution. You got to clear out as a leader at a certain date. People in other walks of football life don't quite understand that if you're publicly owned and it says get out by July 25, you're out by July 25. How did that go over in Green Bay, and how did it go over in your world?
Yeah, it's you're right. I mean, it's we're a publicly held company, and it's been in our bylaws for years. My predecessor, Bob Harlan, had to retire when he turned 70. It's actually 70, and but also it's as of what age are you as of the date of the annual shareholders meeting? So unfortunately, my birthday is July 13th, and the shareholder meeting is normally like the last week in July. So I'll be 70 then, and then step down as of the shareholder meeting.
Well, I have a personal stake in this too, because I compared, and I think I'm about 2 days older than you are. But I feel like I'm 35. Couldn't you plead to these guys to amend the bylaws? I mean, look what you've done.
No, it's served us well. Gosh, Rick, by the time I retire, it'll be almost 18 years I've been in the position. So I think it's time, time for somebody else to take over. And it's such a unique and special organization. I really feel so fortunate that was selected for the position, and really have enjoyed my time here.
Well, we'll get into that in a couple of minutes, the specific areas of uniqueness. So it's 77, I guess, and you're undrafted after Colgate, and you played at Colgate,
Yep.
but yet you expected maybe a little more. Do you have a giant chip that carried you through the Redskins?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I got to tell you the whole story. This is
yeah.
So 1977. Obviously, things were quite a bit different then. I thought that I might get drafted, but I wasn't really sure. They didn't have. I don't think there was a combine then. The scouting wasn't as open as it is now. So I didn't really know whether or not I'd be drafted. I thought I would be. A couple teams have come and looked at me. But back then, the draft was 12 rounds. It was over 2 days. And the very first day of the draft, I get a call from George Allen, the head coach of the Washington Redskins. And George says to me, Mark, we really like you. We're going to fly you down. We're going to draft you. And I was in heaven. I mean, this is great. So now there weren't cell phones then or anything. So I fly down to Washington, D.C. I'm thinking, I'm going to get drafted at any time soon. Well, that was the first day of the draft. So I wasn't drafted in the first day, but next morning got up early and, thought, I'm going to be drafted. Well, they put me in a van with about 5 other players, and the Redskins, they put me up at the Marriott, which is out by Dulles Airport where the Redskins facility was. And they drove us in the van. They drove us down to downtown Washington, D.C., and they took us out for lunch. And I'm thinking, this is great. I've never seen Washington, D.C., but what about being picked. Well, make a long story short, they had no intention of drafting me, and their whole plan was to hide me out so that nobody could reach me as soon as the draft ended. So as soon as the draft ended, George Allen called me into his office and he said, Mark, the draft just ended. You weren't drafted. Here's a contract. Why don't you take a minute, read through it, and then sign it? And then he turned to his assistant and said, if Mark doesn't sign that, let's get that safety from Oklahoma that we like so much. So I called back to my apartment, and my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, said, where the hell have you been? I said, what do you mean? He goes, all these teams are calling you, trying to get in touch with you after the draft. And I'd also heard that the Redskins had given at the hotel everybody directions that not to put any calls through to me. So I was kind of, and Rick, the business, Bruce Allen, George's son.
Sure, of course.
So about 3 or 4 years ago, we were at a league function, and I just was curious. I said, George or Bruce, did your father ever tell you what he did to me on the day of the draft coming out? And he looked at me, he said, quit complaining. It worked out all right for you. I am so glad I am not involved in college athletics. Between the NIL and the transfer portal and then conference realignment, it's crazy.
After you left the Redskins, the AD at Colgate, and then all those years at my alma mater as the athletic director of a Big Ten school that was at Northwestern hopelessly overmatched in terms of number of students, and some would say academic standards, but you led them to unparalleled success in numerous sports. When did you know that you weren't going to be a coach, but rather wanted to be an executive, which is a pretty tight aspiration when you're still playing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did it. I did when I was a player. I was actively involved in the union. I was a Redskins player rep for 6 years, I think, and ended up becoming vice president of the union. And then once my career ended, and I'd kind of grown up around labor relations. My father was director of labor relations for a steel company in the Buffalo area. And so I ended up went to the Players Association, really enjoyed my work there. I was very fortunate working along with Gene Upshaw. While I was working at the Players Association, I went to law school at night. And and I was actually a trial attorney for the Justice Department. 5 years. Really, I enjoyed that, but I did miss my involvement in athletics. And, a real, kind of a change in my career was when Colgate University had an opening for athletic director. The athletic director who I followed was a man named Fred Dunlap, who's been a great mentor to me over the years. He was my head coach for my last year at Colgate. And I did miss my involvement in athletics, so that kind of changed my career path. Ended up being the AD for almost 12 years at Colgate. And then, as you mentioned, went on to Northwestern. I wasn't looking to leave Northwestern, but when the opportunity to come to the Packers arose, it was really too good of an opportunity to pass up. And Northwestern, I just loved it there. We loved living in Chicago, and we had a lot of success in a lot of different areas. And it's. I've always thought a school like Northwestern is kind of the role model for what the NCAA should strive for, is excellence, not only in athletics, but and academically as well. I tell you, Rick, I don't know how many times I was 17, 18 years as an athletic director between Colgate and Northwestern. I am so glad I am not involved in college athletics. Between the NIL and the transfer portal and then conference realignment, it's crazy. And I've got so many friends that are still in the business, and it's just really, really so challenging and changing so rapidly.
How about the friends? We all have a lot of common friends. How about some of the friends who were in the business until a couple of years ago, including a national championship basketball coach and an incredible football coach, and an athletic director at Arizona State. A lot of guys who said, I can't deal with this anymore. They wouldn't say it that way, but it's become more like professional athletics, hasn't it?
Well, it's like professional athletics, but doesn't have a salary cap, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's free agency every year, and it's yeah. I mean, Nick Saban, I think he actually said, one of the reasons he retired was the changes in athletics. We just hired defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, who was the head coach at Boston College, and just talking to him about it, it wears on the coaches. And the nice thing, when you're a coach in the NFL, all you do is coach, and when you're a head coach at especially at a school like Boston College, you're recruiting and re-recruiting your athletes, your student athletes every year, and it's just unbelievable. But the combination of the NIL and the transfer portal, you watch some of these games on TV and the basketball games particularly, and it's, well, this player started at this school and this is his fourth school, and what about? I don't think they worry about graduation rates anymore. When I was an AD, that was a big issue. Are you graduating your athletes? And I think they try to track it, but it's really hard when you're going from school to school. The NFL made a conscious decision to share all TV and ticket revenue evenly, and Green Bay probably would not have the Packers now had that decision not be made.
Probably the most unique position in sports administration, which is running a public company in the middle of a series of entrepreneurs, 31 of them in the NFL, and then there's you and the team. Forbes, and people discount it, and nobody knows what the numbers are, but just to give you a rough idea, your Packers are somewhere in the 20th spot in valuation at $4.5 billion. Of course, you can't be sold, so it doesn't really matter. And the revenue of $577 million, and they know that because the documents are public. But
yeah, when I think in revenue, we're anywhere between 8 to 10, which smallest market is pretty good.
Well, and here was going to be my point. It's not only Mark Murphy and the others who will do whatever you can and mine Wisconsin, and of course you can, and they're avid fans, but the legacy that was left for you with the Maras, the Hallises, the Rooneys, to share television revenue, and of course people that don't understand that there would be no Green Bay Packers but for the fundamental difference between football and other sports. 85% of the revenue or so shared, and much of it TV. So reflect back on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll be forever thankful. And you're right. The decision, made years ago and I think it was probably when TV really started to become big in the 70s and 80s. The NFL made a conscious decision to share all TV and ticket revenue evenly. And Green Bay probably would not have the Packers now had that decision not be made. The Packers, obviously, you look back, we started in 1919, and in the league, in the 20s and early 30s, there were teams in Canton all over the country, and very few of them survived. And the Packers really survived because of the unique ownership structure and the stock sales. We've had 6 stock sales in our history. The first 3 were really about keeping the team alive and surviving in Green Bay. And then, they've had 2 during my tenure, and one in the early 2000s, all really focused on stadium expansion, stadium improvements. But there's nothing like it in professional sports in the United States. There's some CFL teams that have a very similar structure, and then obviously, and also there's some teams and soccer teams in Europe that are community owned. But it works well for us, and I think there's advantages and disadvantages to our structure, but I would say on the whole, there's it's beneficial. And where we really see it is our fan base. We have a social media platform called Packers Everywhere, and our fans really are everywhere, all over the country. I think fans, especially not in NFL cities, they really like the idea of Green Bay Packers, a community-owned team in a small town in the NFL, and yet they're still competitive. And I think because of that, we have a tremendous support across the country.
Delve into the advantages and disadvantages for just a second. Let me do the advantages first. When
Sure.
I was working with the NFL and looking at Lambeau and a little small part in the league kind of expertise top down that ended up in the January 2000 $300 million facelift and the Brown County referendum. The strongest, if you would have thought in any of the other 31 markets that let's go tap the fans to buy pieces of a stadium investment, you'd be run out of the country. But it was just unbelievable how this became not only preserve Lambeau, but preserve the museum that is now Green Bay's and Wisconsin's treasure. Incredibly unique in a number of contexts.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and it starts really, Lambeau Field is just so iconic. Yeah, and we have a Hall of Fame. Not many teams have that as well. Yeah, no, there's the one thing we don't have a wealthy, deep-pocketed owner who if you really need money for a major renovation or any signing a new coach or we don't have that wealthy owner. So what we have done though is we have a corporate reserve fund that we built up. It's about $500 million now, and so we invest that. We have on our board, and it's really my position as president of the organization is really in a lot of ways similar to being a president of a university, where you have a board of trustees or a board of directors, and you report out to them, and decisions aren't made by an individual owner. It's I'm charged with making the final decisions, but I also get an awful lot of input, particularly from our executive committee on our board. But yeah, it's very unique. Our ticket pricing, we want to be just below the league average, because early in my tenure, I think 2009 or 10, we had slipped to 30th in the league, and I'd heard from a couple owners that listen, you sell out every game, you shouldn't be at the bottom of the league in terms of your average ticket price.
The franchise is so unique, and there are 31 different models that are not that. Do most NFL owners and your contemporaries understand that the model needs to be preserved and basically glorified? This is a testament to NFL history and should be messaged that way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think particularly you mentioned the Maras and the Rooneys, McCaskies. They have a real sense of the history, and they understand what the Packers mean to the league. Some of the newer owners, I think they obviously understand that the Packers are unique, but I don't know if they really know the history of it.
And we all understand the way the NFL has evolved, which is another reason why the partnership is so astute with the PSL sharing money that would allow the NFL teams to write checks from PSLs. This is your equivalent, and of course the owners are going to approve it because stadium rising tides lift all boats all over the league, and I think everybody now understands that.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're really sensitive about is we want to be affordable to our fans, and and so what we've tried to do is our ticket pricing, we want to be just below the league average, because early in my tenure, I think 2009 or 10, we had slipped to 30th in the league, and I'd heard from a couple owners that listen, you sell out every game, you shouldn't be at the bottom of the league in terms of your average ticket price. So we've kind of adjusted that a little bit, and we do benefit a little bit We have, I think, the second largest stadium in the league. It's 82,300. The only one bigger is MetLife in New York. I've always it's kind of ironic, or certainly not expected, that the team in by far the smallest city in the NFL has the second largest stadium. It's a tribute to our the type of support that we get from our fans.
What was the hardest thing you ever had to do? Be a defensive back for the Redskins, be a successful trial attorney, be an AD in a small school, be an AD in the Big Ten, or be the CEO of the Packers?
Jeez. Well, I tell you, I've enjoyed them all, and every job has its challenges, but playing in the NFL is very hard. And I just have so much respect for our players and what they go through, and the ups and downs, and difference between success and failure as a player and as a team is so the difference is just so minimal that really have great respect. And I think back on my career, I mentioned it earlier, how fortunate I was to play for some great coaches and have teammates, and the success that we've had as a league is just phenomenal. And I don't know if it's Taylor Swift or the game's getting more and more popular, but the ratings keep getting better and better.